Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Bob?
I am doing wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here at the Pop Culture SquadCast Live. We are 2 weeks into the new year. It's not till next week that the country as we know it, you know, devolves into ridiculousness. But it's on its way. Um,
It's well on its way.
it's been a busy couple of days. We're going to talk about some things that have happened over the last couple of days that are of note to this world that we live in. We're going to talk about some new comics. We're going to talk about some. We're going to have a guest very shortly. I was texting with them earlier. Phillip Kennedy Johnson will be on the show tonight. We will talk about things he's done, things that are coming up. We can talk about his controversies too. Why not?
It's been a really rough week. And by week, I mean 2 days.
Yes, it has. It has been
Monday,
a
day. I mentioned this on Facebook to Paul Levitt. I said, wow, this is really like compressed into something horrible. And Paul gave a response that I would normally give if nobody said that to me. He said, yeah, wait till next week. Well,
yeah. It has been that. All right. One of the things that we wanted to talk about, and I want to kind of get to it first and kind of get it out of the way because I want to talk about it as little as possible. There has been an article that has been released yesterday. It was written by a journalist or writer or person who puts words to paper named Lila Shapiro. It's in Vulture, which is part of New York Magazine. The article is called "There Is No Safe Word," subtitled "How the Best-Selling Fantasy Author Neil Gaiman Hid the Darkest Parts of Himself for Decades." So I encourage people to read it as there will. Trigger warnings. There's a lot of really bad stuff in it. What it entails is a bunch of people who have spoken to this writer and to other people, alleging and documenting their experiences with Neil. They are not PG rated. And it dropped yesterday. Most people in the industry are familiar with it by now, or have read parts of it, or have heard people reading about it. It is horrifying on its face. For what it's worth, Neil Gaiman has responded on his blog with a denial of the fact that he believed that any of the events that occurred were non-consensual, and that through his representation in the article, he denies pretty much everything.
pretty much. I mean, he doesn't deny it as a denial. He
Right.
denies it as an explanation. And he says that he, never committed non-consensual sex with anybody. Fact of the matter is, in these situations, most of which are all too real and all of which are horrible, one person may think they do have consent when the person who gives that consent does not feel that way. And I don't know how you spell it out any more firmly. None of us were there except for the two people involved in the incidents, each of the incidents.
Yes.
So we really don't know. I've known Neil for 4 decades, so I am not defending Neil. I am acknowledging his statement, and I acknowledge the fact that his perception and the complainant's observations could all be real from their heart. So that makes this an enormously complicated situation. I don't think, given a legitimate environment. I don't think that Neil's got a lot of work ahead of him for the foreseeable future. I could be wrong. There's no way to prove the allegations. There's no way for him to exonerate himself. And that's tough because
It is.
And do we deserve an explanation? Well, yeah, probably. I mean, we're supposed to be spending money on his stuff, and maybe it'd be a good idea if we knew what we're tapping into. And maybe we do. We don't know.
And here's the thing. And, you and I were talking, before air about journalism. We live in this world, in this donut shop where, we're all there. And as you say many times, maybe we don't like somebody, but we respect them. And we have this world that we live in, and we talk to each other. And there's some level of respect that goes along with success. So it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult for everybody here who read or enjoyed the things that someone created, only to find out that that person was doing things, whether he recognized it or not, that other people perceived as abusive. And it's difficult for people to deal with that.
It is very hard.
And is completely understandable. And it is hard as a member of the community, to have to deal with that. I've seen a lot of people responding. A friend of mine and yours called me yesterday because they needed to talk to somebody about what was going on, and not that they were connected directly to it or it affected them, but just there's a lot of people saying a lot of things. I didn't want to say anything tonight. I'll be honest with you. You talked me into it.
Yeah, I forced your hand, and I'm sorry, but
Nope.
My rationale for that is this is an important issue, even though, and maybe because it's really an irresolvable issue. It makes us all go crazy because we'll never truly know. I've worked at rape crisis lines. I've worked I've put together programs like that back in my social services days. And I know, as most people who've been through that know, that about 1 out of 20 such complaints are bullshit. 1 out of 20. That's not really a lot. That means that 19 out of 20 are true.
Exactly.
But the higher the profile you have, the more likely it is that somebody's trying to extort. That's why we immediately go to how many people have complained. Because if a whole lot of unrelated people have complained, maybe there's something going on here.
Well, that is the case here.
I'm sorry?
That is the case here.
Yes,
a whole lot of unrelated people have complained.
And I, as a friend of Neil's, I feel bad that he's going through it if it isn't absolutely correct, and he thinks it's not. But it's not a resolvable situation, and I feel horrible about that. I feel horrible about that for the complainants, because those women have a right to be heard.
Yes.
But there's no way to prove anything one way or the other.
Well, I don't. The thing is that we live in this world where it doesn't have to be proven. Right. People are going to make their own opinions, and they're going to go with them. And at the end of the day, he's just a guy who wrote stuff to some people, and some people will choose to not participate in his work going forward, and that is 100% an understandable right of theirs. So
there are people who have.
I do encourage people, though. One of the things I'm sorry, Mike. I do encourage people to read for themselves and make the decisions based on the actual things that have been stated, not what you've heard from somebody else. If you can,
that's right.
If you need to make a decision, if you feel like you need to make a decision on this topic, get the data yourself. Unfortunately, I had to pay for it, which was irritating on another level, but it was $1. um, and
It's cheaper than the magazine.
well, I got to pay for like $4 for a month or something like that. But it's it, like I said, journalism and integrity in journalism is important. This is a very detailed, very long piece that gives a lot of information about history. It makes some leaps. It makes some assumptions, but in the end of the day, the author does clearly state the allegations, does state the denials, and then if you feel so inclined, you can go to Neil's site if you're interested in finding out where that is. The Beat does have a piece up. We recommend you know, we're friends of the Beat, so if you want to go to the Beat, they do have a piece up kind of talking about it, and gives a link to Neil's response.
Out of a sense of fair play, I'm not endorsing any view on this subject. Out of the sense of fair play,
Fair play.
bad pun.
Okay.
Bad, didn't mean that.
Please.
In the sense of fair play, I think that both the allegations and Neil's response are mandatory. If you're just listening to gossip, you're an idiot. There's tons of gossip. You don't need this shit or anything else. You know, let's tell stories about Mickey Mouse being in public domain. We don't need more bullshit. We need facts we're not going to get.
Right. And everyone's entitled to the opinion that they have. Once they've done that research, make your opinion, and I have no argument with you.
If you know what you're talking about, absolutely.
You know?
I mean, if you're well informed, people think they're entitled to their opinion. That is complete bullshit. You are only entitled to an informed opinion.
Correct.
I cannot say that you are a child molester unless I have something to back that up. It's not my right to express an opinion that you are a child molester if I don't have anything to say about why I on how I can back that up. So an informed opinion in these situations, in all situations, is critical.
Yep, I agree. Well, we're going to transition. Thank you everyone for listening to that. I apologize that we had to get so serious there. So we're going to break it really quick and say hi to Bill. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Hey, Bill.
Glad you're watching. Hi, Sherry. Glad you're
Sherry.
watching. We're going to pivot to something else that, you know, when I was preparing for the show, I was like, I usually do these little things, and I didn't have to create one of these because it already existed. We already had about Diamond issues, and Diamond is having issues again. Very big issues. It affects this community. We have to talk about it.
We need to state that you are broadcasting from.
I am broadcasting from about 15, 20 miles from Diamond's headquarters.
Right.
So Diamond Comic Distributors has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is a reorganizational type of bankruptcy. They sent out a letter to their customers today. Subsequently, there's been, according to court filings, confirmation that Universal Distribution, a Canadian-based distributor, has agreed to acquire Alliance Game Distributors and Diamond's UK division for $39 million. And there's been Diamond's bank has agreed to provide debtor in possession financing to help Diamond get through the process. What Diamond said is that earlier today, Diamond made the difficult decision to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The step is intended to stabilize our financial foundation and protect the most vital aspects of our business. The idea behind this is to provide them the opportunity to restructure, address their financial obligations, and this process will likely include the sale of key assets of Diamond Comic Distributors.
Right. Let us remember.
This is a grab your sphincter moment.
Well, it is. Let us remember that Diamond was not one of the original comics direct sales distributors, but they came up pretty damn fast. And I've known Steve probably a generation longer than I've known Neil Gaiman. I knew Steve since he was a mailman.
Yeah,
actually, he was a mailman. And he did wonders with the company. I'm not crazy about monopolies, and it did cause some real upheaval in the industry when Diamond became the only direct sales distributor of new comics. Since then, and that was 32 years ago or something, I don't know.
a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. There's no math here. And of course, business is going to change. For one thing, Steve is 30 odd years older, as am I. Market conditions are going to change. DC and Marvel were in, they were out. How do you exist without DC and Marvel? Well, you really can, but not without all those others that have drifted away. Times change. I hate to see any business that employs humans go through this because you wind up with a lot of unemployed humans.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. You weren't finished.
It doesn't help the comic store owners that order from Diamond, and they've been having their troubles too. And it doesn't help the creators whose livelihoods are dependent upon those very sales that are hanging in the wind. So this could be potentially catastrophic. I don't think so. I'm told the UK operation is profitable. I'm sure the games division, which used to be headquartered about 3 blocks from where I grew up.
That's sold.
Yeah, that's sold. I was a little taken aback when they bought it in the first place. But that's being sold off. So they got $39 million and some loans to save their souls. And of course, I hope they do. Steve's a good guy, and most of the people I know, and we know a lot of people from Diamond because I hang out at the
my initial concern is I know a lot of people who work there,
right,
and I worry for them.
Absolutely.
I have not heard from any of them. I'm not about to bother them. I think they've got to deal with this. However, my take on this is that there are a bunch of things that have contributed to this. One is, this is a cascading event that has been almost 5 years in the making now.
That's true.
The COVID reaction of Diamond caused by the shutdown of tons of people and people being out of work. The reaction that Diamond had during that caused a tremendous amount of upset by their customers, meaning the publishers, and the publishers, said, well, we don't have to deal with this monopoly. And the thing is that up for 30 years, or 20 something years, they built up an ecosystem and an economy of scale for their business as a monopoly. And when you no longer have the revenue that monopoly is generating, because things like Lunar exist now, and things like Penguin Random House are distributing their own stuff, and you no longer have that, well, then your economy doesn't work because you don't have that net revenue. And they were not nimble enough to scale that back. Plus the fact, the nail in the coffin, or the tipping point, was the needing to vacate that the warehouse that happened last year, which caused a ton of stuff, and they've been late, they've been delayed, they're having to get out of things. It's just a matter of time. I'm gonna put Gene's got it. By the way, tune in next week and we can hear Gene talk live and in person. Gene will be on a show next week, but he's saying, do you expect Diamond to treat small publishers as unsecured creditors, that they don't have to pay for their books, and what are the odds that Diamond will be around a year from now? And that's kind of what I was getting to.
Speculation.
It is.
I think they're going to have a hard time. That's a real uphill fight. I hope they don't stiff those people who they could stiff, no matter who that is, if they have the money to not stiff them. I mean, if they don't have the money, there's not much you can do. For example, when was the last time you bought anything at Sears? In other words, Sears was, until like 10, 15 years ago, the largest retail operation in history. And now they're out of business. This happens. Throughout history, this happens. It's part of the capitalist system, and I don't say that pejoratively. Because if the government owned it all, there'd be nothing to go out of business. But this happens, and it happens to friends of mine, and it happens to friends of ours, and it happens within our industry. When was the last time a major comic book publisher went out of business?
2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it happens,
and it's still that it still has ripple effects. There are still people hurting from that. I think that what we're getting at is, we have to have some faith and some hope that Diamond can write this. The solution, from the outside looking in, which we don't have any details, is that they need to scale down their structures. They don't have the incoming revenue because so many people have left to sustain their staff at the levels that they were, and their operation at the levels that they were. They need to figure out what works for what they have. There are good still. I mean, there are plenty of publishers who are still using Diamond, and so we're concerned about them as well.
And what you're talking about is what Chapter 11 bankruptcy is for. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of Chapter 11. The purpose of it is to try to save what you can and keep as many people employed and keep the economy moving. That's the purpose. Does it work? Yes, sometimes. I know of bankrupt organizations that got back on their feet. We all do.
Yep.
And we all know the opposite.
Sure.
I don't want to be dismissive because I got a lot of friends at Diamond, and I've had even more over the years. But that's business for you.
Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on it. We'll talk about it as more information comes out. So, stay tuned. That was the news of today and the news of yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit for a minute about the news of yesterday, or the news of tomorrow, which we like to say is new number one.
Right. Bob's got new toys. I love it.
I know. We're gonna get I'm gonna play with my new toys. There's a couple of new number ones that I want to talk about. It's not a lot. We because our guest is in the green room. We're gonna get to Phillip very soon. So thank you guys for hanging with us. But I do want to talk about this. There's a book that's coming out from one of our favorites, which is Ahoy Comics, and it is called Howl, and it comes out tomorrow. It is by Elisa Quitney and Alain Morissette. It is really good. I read issue 1. It comes out tomorrow. It's beautiful. Morissette is a fantastic illustrator and a great storyteller. The story is set in the 50s. There's some sci-fi aspects to it. And and I really like it.
I like that cover. I haven't read the book
Yes.
yet. uh, it's been a hectic few days,
Yes.
but I like that cover for a couple of really bizarre reasons. The first is that it's essentially in pastels, and we don't see that. The second is that because of the way the green back is expressed on that white background, the logo pops.
I knew you were going to like the logo, and I was looking at the logo. I'm like, what's Mike going to say about the logo?
Mike is not the logo, because you walk into the comic book store and there's this big wall of comics.
I understand. Morissette did the logo. I actually looked ahead of time to know, so I can answer that for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is that the folks over at Ahoy, I'll read the first issue of anything they publish.
Well, I want to talk. So we and I have been. We were talking earlier about there's a book that they just came out. There's issue 2 is out now. I think issue 3 comes out soon of Archaic. Sally Cantrino's doing the art in that. What do you think of that book?
Only read the first issue, and I read it about 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
So I read it last year, but I enjoyed it. I was not surprised that I enjoyed it. It's a little off base, which is another way of saying it's published by Ahoy, because that's what they do, and they do a great job of that. So what I was most impressed with, I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the quality of the story, I enjoyed the craftsmanship that went into the story, but the fact of the matter is, they lived up to their reputation. They, as far as I'm concerned, they've knocked another one out of the park.
Well, here's
I'm looking forward to how.
I'm gonna spoil just a little bit. I'm gonna read you the first 2 things, because I read this and I'm like, okay, I'm in. So it says it takes place in Greenwich Village in August 1957. It says, August, in another time when the females of the species painted their lips red, 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 and shaped their mammary protrusions into rocket ships, sharp as the tail fins on a Cadillac Eldorado. America ran on mechanical dreams, hatched in the hipster oasis below 14th Street.
Yeah.
I'm good. That's good to go.
I'm good with that. Yeah. She's a good writer. Alicia's good, really good writer. And I have high respect for, I think, everybody who ever worked at Vertigo. So this has a lot going for it. That little bit of wordsmithing you just reported, it's brilliant.
It was brilliant. It's very good. It's really, really well written. The other thing that the other book I wanted to talk about, and if we just take a minute here, just so you know, there's somebody in the comments, and we are going to talk to Phillip very shortly. So thanks for being here, and we are going to talk about the House of L. So I know that people have already asked, so we will talk about it. This book, it also comes out this week, and I haven't read it yet. I'm very excited to. It's called Finders Keepers. It's by Vita Ayala, Skyla Patridge, Jason Wordie, and Becca Carey, and all of them are rock stars. They're all fantastic people. If you're not familiar with Sky Patridge, she was doing I'm not sure, they were doing the Supergirl backup in Action Comics over the last 12 weeks. Vita Ayala is fantastic. Jason Wordie is one of my favorite, most interesting colorists out there. Becca Carey is great. This is part of the Horizon experiment. And when I was in New York Comic Con, I talked to one of the people at Image, and I'm like, well, what can I do for you? What is things that what do you need for me? And she said to me, the Horizon experiment. And it took me a while to get to it. I've read now 3 of them. There are 5. This is a mission. There are 5 one-shots, and I encourage everybody to get them.
The names of the other 3 that are out?
I will get to them. Okay. This is an idea by Pornsak Pinchot. Quixote. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's brilliant. He's a great writer. He wrote The Good Asian. He was an editor at DC Vertigo. He's a great comic book writer, but he had an idea. He's like, what if we took all of those great tropes that we have in our world and those fantastic experiments and those ideas that we have and change them radically and put a person of a different lived experience in that main role, and how would it be different? So there are 5 books, and these are all tryouts essentially. If they hit, if they get a reaction, maybe there might be more of it. So the results are 5 books: Chinese James Bond, a Muslim John Constantine, a family of werewolves with East African descent, an Evil Dead for black nerds, and a reverse Indiana Jones. And this is the reverse Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I mean, what? He hits himself with a whip? Why? I don't
know. I don't know, but we're gonna find out. The books are called The Manchurian, which I've read, The Sacred and the Damned, Moondogs, Motherfucking Monsters, and Finders Keepers. You can get them at your local comic shop. I'm sure they still have them. You can find them on your Kindle app. Read them. They're good. He's gotten some great writers and creators of different experiences to put these together, and I'm a big fan of it. I think all of them have been excellent so far.
The coolest thing about this is that it is an experiment.
Yeah,
they're showing us stuff that they want to see if we like it enough. There used to be a tradition of that in the comics business where they'd have tryout issues of books, usually 3-issue runs, but even that got polluted over the decades. But they didn't experiment all that much. These days, wow, we're getting all kinds of great stuff and some shit, but that's what happens. We're getting all kinds of great stuff that we never would have seen 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Never.
Yep, I agree. Like I said, I recommend them. I think they're worth a shot. They're a little bit longer length. There are some great creators on them, and you should, if you're looking for something new, something different, something with a different experience, not just for shock value, but with authenticity, go check them out. And Pornsack's story about how he went about it is on the inside cover of all of them. So before you even read it, you can see where he's going with it and give you an idea to go from there.
Great.
All right. Thanks for hanging in there for our opening segment, folks. Again, we do this every Tuesday night. We will be here next Tuesday night with Gene Ha, who I don't know if he's still watching, but we will have Gene Ha next week. We're talking about stuff like that. Our guest is here. He was the first guest on the Pop Culture SquadCast Live when we went live 2 years ago in February. He was the first guest that we had on. And so this is his 3rd time on the show. And we're excited to have him back and talk about the stuff that's happened since he's been here last and what he's got coming up. So welcome back, Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Welcome back. How are you? How's things with you this year?
Pretty good. Staying busy.
Staying busy.
Yeah,
about to wrap up my time with the
Army. A cap on your head.
What's that? Yeah, look at that
on your head. There was some noise going around before bigger things preempted it. Your next Superman venture. Let's clear that up first.
Well, first, I haven't used this mic in a while. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, we hear you great.
Okay, great. It's good to see you both.
Yep,
Good to
absolutely.
It's a
see you.
pleasure to see people who know a lot more about comics than me. So what happened was we've been working on the Superman book. And there was some debate about when to put it out this year. And I want to thank everyone who's watching who is so stoked to learn about that book. We're really excited to do it, obviously. Superman, I'm never gonna let go of Superman. Like I have so many stories I could write with Superman that I could just do that until I'm dead. So the chance to get to do another series is just, I'm just over the moon happy about it. But we were just trying to figure out when we were going to put it out. There are other time sensitive books coming out right now, and we wanted to get a good bit of it in the can before we started putting on shelves. And there was a time when we were considering putting it out in March or April. April's what I had heard, but apparently somebody enough us thought March, and there was just a little miscommunication about when it was coming out. Because there was the debate was, there's some other books that I shouldn't spoil here that are coming out that, you know, that would potentially conflict with what this book was doing. There's all the, you know, there's people who really care
Will
about
they
continuity.
eventually conflict?
What's that?
Will they eventually conflict with what this book is doing?
I don't think they'll conflict now.
Okay.
But I think they would have if the book had come out like this spring. So
this concept of planning and about non-conflicting seems strange.
Well, you know, it's a big, you know, whatever.
I mean, I just read 12 issues of something that happened before something happened 3 months ago.
Say it again. Sorry.
You said I just read 12 issues of something that happened before something happened 3 months ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, there's so many moving pieces in the continuity.
Sure.
I personally,
I'm understandable. I get that that's how it goes. So the fact that you're
Right.
telling me that the reason for this whole, miscommunication was that you wanted to not compete with certain things. I applaud that. It's just, it's ironic.
Well, that was one element of it. Another element was the issue of the movie, and just because of what we're doing in this story, we thought that would also fit nice later in the year after the James Gunn film comes out. And I don't know. There were just a lot of reasons, and honestly, I personally wanted to have more of it in the can than we do right now before we start putting it out. Like comics are time sensitive. There's always, if you're writing comics that are coming out every month on the regular, that next one is like always right on your heels.
Sure.
And, and the days of everyone being expected to be able to draw a book a month, doing that kind of detail and like the kind of level that people are doing now, that's not book a month shit.
Yeah.
Like I know there are people who do it, but very often you need fill-ins and you've got to, find ways to get the next book out the door, very often with guest artists. And, man, I would love it if Scott did the whole book, I really want the whole thing to be one solid piece. And Scott did such a friggin' amazing electric job on House of L, the Future State story that we did. And he still identifies with that book a lot. He loves the work that we did together on that book. And I do too. Like there's a couple of images on my social media as like my banner or my profile thing that Scott drew of Superman and his son.
Yeah. So Mike, sent me the Bleeding Cool article where people jumping the gun saying, "Oh, it's canceled" and whatever, which is not true. But I said, well, he sent me that last week, and I said, well, we'll talk to him about it when you're on the show. Because I know, and you and I have talked about this, I know how much that story means to you, and that there's so much you still have to say with the things that you started with Future State, back when you first came on the book, and so I knew that this was something that wasn't just going to go away, that it wouldn't have just gone away, that you would hold on to it.
Yeah,
we have done this project a disservice because here we have been babbling about it for like 10 minutes without saying its name, it's who else is working on it, or a vague idea of what it's about.
Yeah. So, well, the story is it's Adventures of Superman, and the title of the story that we're telling within Adventures of Superman is called Book of L. And man, I would love to tell you all about it. And there's a big reveal at the end of the first issue, and I think people will probably be able to put together what the setting is and what's going to happen vaguely, because I set up these massive pieces in the War World saga that we did, and not everything has been addressed from that story yet. So anyone who's read my Superman work up till now, including Future State, understands that there are still stories in there yet to be told. I mean, even there's big things. Obviously, we introduced the concept of Algren, the god of gods, like one of the first world gods that was pulled apart by his brother and sister gods and to save creation. And the 7 god aspects of Algren were split across the multiverse, and they're out there. And one of them was the seed that became Warworld, and there are 6 others. And there are also these little kernels of ideas, like we see Bila Esh, who we now know is another one of those gods from the old days, who we know him as a storyteller on Warworld. And we see him telling a story to a little girl, and she asks him a question, and he says, that story has yet to be told. We're going to see that too. We're going to see, I have all these different threads, and I intend to continue every single one.
So you're in this for the long haul.
I hope so. Oh, well, this particular series is we're calling it a maxi series. So I don't want to say necessarily that it will all happen in the pages of this series, but it's not a mini series either. Like it's of some length, and we're going to cover a lot of ground with it. And
so maxi series in DC terms from the 80s meant 12 issues.
Well, I can't speak to that.
Okay. So
I'm so much younger than you, Bob.
That's what that means. So if you say
Not
that,
actually.
is that what it means, or are we redefining those words?
I don't know. Spoiler pants. You're just gonna have to wait.
All right. I'm just asking. Listen. I want to change a little bit.
I think we've moved away from that definition in the last
I guess.
Well, that's a word. I mean, nobody put that word on the book. Like,
yeah, no, I get it.
That's just a word I just threw out there just now.
That's fine.
So
that's
not
okay.
It is not a mini series. I'll say that.
I will take it. I it is going to be what it is going to be. It's going to be. I'm excited.
I mean, I do have an ending in mind. And there's a number on it, but it's how that goes too. Like like
I'm
the
very
schedules
confident.
Go ahead.
I'm very confident there are probably several tomes of this story already written in your head, and so
yeah,
I don't expect that. There's not a lot that nobody knows, and there's probably a lot that nobody will ever know because it'll just stay in your head because you don't really need it to get the story across, but you've already written it. So that's pretty much how you work. And I want to say that we've talked a bunch before, and you've been on the show before, and we talk about the way you do, but I want to again commend you on the storytelling that you have developed over the past decade, and it's a decade now that you've been doing this. That you're very serious. You can tell that you're very serious about what you're doing. When you can consume media and content on its face value, and it's wonderful. When you take a step back and look and think about what the creator is doing in you in particular, I can tell you're very serious about what you're trying to do and what you're and it works. It works very well.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I mean, it matters a lot to me. I'm trying to never do the quick, easy, dumb thing, the quick, easy, dumb version of the thing. Like I always want it to hold up to scrutiny. And when people look close, I don't want them to ever be able to look at it and see that it's fake. Like I don't want them to see fiction. I want them to look closer and closer and see more and more little bits of love that we put in there to make the whole world real. Like I've seen that whenever I see that in other forms of media, in comics, but also in film or games or prose novels or whatever. Like, all the songs and the care that went into the languages in Tolkien's world.
Sure.
That world is real. I just love it. Just makes it, you can just look closer and closer. You know that every word, every name for a place in Middle Earth, there's real etymology behind it. They're not just making up Warcrafty sounding names.
Yeah.
there's it's kind of like there are root words at play in every one of those words, and I love that. There's I don't know if you guys watched the HBO show The Last of Us, but it was based on a video game that was a masterpiece. And if you walk through there, you can find this so I think it was like a sewer treatment plant or something, but it had been taken over and lived in the many years between like the outbreak and the years that you're playing this game. And there's this whole little colony that lived there, and there's drawings on the walls that children drew, and there are little journal entries, and
Oh yeah.
you get those little pieces and you just can't help but to keep digging more. And it's like, I want to know what happened to these people, and that's when you give them those pieces like that and you make it clear that there is more that they're not seeing, that the world exists, whether they're looking at it or not. That makes them hungry to find more.
That's true. That's true. But you also bring something to the table. You bring a wonderful affinity for Superman, for the character itself. And okay, 20,000 people have written Superman in the last 90 years. And many of them did a very good job. And many of them did a very close job. But the fact of the matter is that you have an affinity for those characters.
Oh, well, thanks, Mike.
And you can bring that, you do bring that to the table, because that's what a writer does. It's not what a hack does, it is what a writer does. So when you say things like this about this Superman thing that you're doing, I want to read it.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I won't let you down. We're working hard for you.
All right.
I want to. So thanks for off the top, hitting that. I knew we wanted to talk
Yeah,
about
of course.
it, and you and I mentioned it, and I know some of our listeners were interested. I want to talk about the second other newest thing. There's a bunch of new stuff we haven't talked about, but I want to talk about this. I want to talk about Batman and Robin first.
Yeah.
And I want to dovetail a little bit on what Mike was just saying about your affinity for for the story that you're telling, because this story, you're making me like Damian a hell of a lot more than I ever thought I'd ever like Damian.
Oh, good. Well, Damian is a great example of that thing we were just talking about, where it's easy to do the quick version, just make him a little jerk,
I understand that. And but then there's another aspect where you're telling a story that you are uniquely qualified to tell. There's a definite parental story that you're telling here. You're telling the story from a parent's point of view in a lot of ways. So Ed's also enjoying it. So you have more than one fan. So
oh, thanks.
But
Ed.
Yeah, Ed doesn't like anything. So.
I've been bugging Mike about it. I'm like, have you read this yet? Because it's so good. It's definitely first day reads as soon as I get it all, the new issues of Batman and Robin. The story that you're telling is fantastic. I talked to other people about it, and I'm like, you should read this, because there's this piece that happens in the present time, and then there's a flashback, and the flashback has just the best aspects to it. Like, and I've mentioned this to you, but Carmine Giancandar, I can't pronounce his name. Carmine, who's doing the backup or the flashback pages.
Yeah.
Is the perfect artist to do that.
Right.
And the palette, the muted but bright, like the limited but bright palette that they're using to color those pages is perfect. It sets it off, but it's just the right things, and what Javi's doing, just it's amazing. And I've seen some of these pages in person. Some of the I saw them when we were in New York. He had them. they're ridiculously
It's
amazing.
absurd, right?
Yeah,
Like he's the guy is just born to draw Batman. And I love his Robin too. Oh God, the action is so great. I
just want to say this is something that hit me right here, and this is part of storytelling that if you don't catch it, it's fine. But sometimes you don't catch it, but you saw it and it affected you. In the last issue, I think it's the last issue that I read, they're training across rooftops, and they take off the weight vests, and they drop, and they crush what's underneath them. Like there's
Yeah.
it's a throwaway thing. You don't need to put that in the panel. But when you do it and you notice it, it adds so much to the story. Just the fact that they're doing this, they're having this conversation about all these things that are going on while carrying probably half of their weight with them as well. And then they drop it, and then you can almost feel relief for them because you see them drop it.
Yeah, he says it. Yeah, Damian drops that thing right as he says something super heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he there's just like this clunk, and like right when it hurts you, like with the thing that he says something like his dad says something to me like, "You have a dad to talk to. I didn't," or something.
Yeah.
And he says like, "You had Pennyworth," and you like,
yeah,
you know, and I don't want.
Yes. Oh, that was hard.
Like, I don't want
to do that. To be honest with you,
I don't want anyone dying for my mistakes like he did for yours. And you're just like, Jesus, that's so hard. But it was really important to me that the thing hits like right then, you know.
But that is something that a kid like that in that situation at that age would say.
Yeah.
And I think most of us have found ourselves at that age saying really stupid stuff like that.
Right.
The trick to storytelling is storytellers are magicians. So, of course, dropping the vest is a moment. If you don't catch it, well, there's lots of stuff that we catch, we don't catch, who knows?
Right.
But if you catch it, it's value added.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, Damian's at that age where like a lesser kid would be saying stuff like, "Oh, I hate you, Dad," or whatever. But you know, so they had that moment like that, except Damian's so much more capable, and he's right. He's also right about that.
The thing about Damian is he's always freaking right.
Yeah,
he's a very difficult character. My initial reaction to him was, I think, similar to Bob's. You know, like, oh my God, this is just the most disgusting human being in the world. Not in political office.
I will say my initial reaction to Damian was I had no desire for him unless he was with Dick.
Yeah, that was a cool dynamic.
Otherwise, I don't care for him. And then it was okay if he was with John, because him and John together is good. This is the best I've seen him with Bruce that I've ever seen.
I'm glad. Well, there's a lot more to come. I guess I should cross my fingers or knock on wood when I say that. But
I hope so too.
But yeah, it's when people saw him in the first issue, there were some Damian fans who got online and were like, "Man, he's backstepped, he's backpedaled back to where he used to be," and blah blah. So just give me a second. Like the beat that I really wanted to end the first issue with the beat where he presumably saves the girl and the other guy from the falling chandelier, and he's full of himself, and he looks down and sees that she's actually badly hurt, and it's kind of his fault. That was where I was gonna end the first issue, but it was just too full. So I was like, yeah, this is, I don't know. It was going to rush everything else to get to that point, and it just felt like
no, it worked. It worked. The pacing worked. The cliffhanger at the end of the first issue was fine. The fact that happened in the second issue was perfect.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Well, yeah, no.
Yeah, I really want to see.
I'm glad the first issue ended at the cliffhanger that it did. It was not rushed.
There was this great note that I got a long time ago, and this has nothing to do with Batman and Robin, but this is years ago, and I was pitching for an anthology, for a DC Halloween anthology. And I was like, oh, this is too easy. This is totally what I'm born to do. So I pitched, they specifically asked for an Aquaman thing, I think I pitched them that and one other thing. And I came up with this really cool lore and character for a thing called at the time I was calling the Sea Witch or the Swamp Witch or something. Sea Witch, I think. This as a whole like placeholder title. And what I turned in something I thought was very cool. And they hit back with I think they were very grateful. It's like, this is really cool, but I think we're going to pass on it. I'm like, oh no. Like later on, I was like, can I ask you why you passed on the Aquaman thing? And the feedback was, well, why is it an Aquaman story? And it's like, well, what do you mean? It was like, well, what is it? Why does this have to be Arthur that goes through this particular thing? And in my head, I'm thinking lame things like, well, it's in the water, man. It's a water story, like, yeah, but what about his character makes it? I didn't actually say that, but I was trying to justify in my head, like, well, why wasn't Aquaman story? And I don't know. That was such a great note.
That the story needs to fit the character.
Yeah, like if you can replace the character with anyone else, obviously you can't replace Aquaman with any other character that's not somehow suited to the setting of an Aquaman story. But that aside, setting aside, powers aside, why is this a story for this particular person? And I'll never forget that. And there are a few touchstones like that in every story that I do. But I'm always kind of thinking about that note. It's like, why does this have to be a Batman story? Why is that specifically? Why is this a Batman and a Robin story? Why could this story not be told in Detective or in Batman or in Brave the Bold or whatever? So yeah, I have a very clear vision for what I want Gotham to be in this story. It's just, I need my Batman stories to be a detective noir story. To have the, I love the element of the Long Halloween where you kind of see so many of the rogues gallery kind of show up, like all these people who are suspects, kind of. That gives it that really cool detective story, like a real mystery kind of feel that I think Batman stories kind of need. I mean, there's so many that don't have that, but those are always my favorites, where you're seeing this mystery play out in real time. And I don't know, I just love that. There's those elements of detective noir stuff, of the theatrical looking villains, but also still has to be like foggy and rainy and serious in that way. But also why, what's Damian's place in this? Like, why is this specifically a Batman and Robin book? So it all kind of goes back to that Aquaman note so I just needed to hear it right then in my career. Whereas like, it can't just be about the stupid powers or how things look. It needs to be about the character.
You can always change the powers. Don't worry. That happens.
Right. Well, the powers are important too. I wanted to show why. I wanted to show why this story has to be a well, okay, like what would it be like to be Batman's son? Like, what's the thing that sets Batman apart is because he's also superhumanly capable. Mm-hmm. What does he do? What is the lifestyle like that enables him to hang with people like Superman and Flash and whoever and be just as good or better than they are? And so like the timestamp always has the centiseconds in there. Like he's picking apart the clock down to like the millisecond. He's insisting that Robin, when they're speaking, he's like, okay, now we're going to speak in Lebanese. Now we're going to speak in Russian. Now we're going to speak in Mandarin or whatever. Like now do the accent from this region, like he's having them, he's kind of just making him work all the time so that he can, hang with everyone else in this world that they're in. So I want to see what a stressful world that is like.
We rarely see Batman as a detective. We hear about him as a detective. You're the greatest detective. And Ra's al Ghul keeps on calling him detective.
Right.
It was like the Dick Tracy movie. We never saw Dick Tracy in the movie detect.
Yeah.
We don't see Batman detect. What we can see is Batman being a detective by passing his knowledge and his observations on to Damian.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Thank you. That's that thing, the exact thing you just said. Like we only know Batman's a detective is because people say it all the time. Right. And they're like, Batman's a great detective, as everyone knows. But like how, if you're just reading the book, you don't know that.
Yeah, what did he detect?
Right. So,
And so you're doing that.
Joker, come on.
yeah.
No, it's. We have a question that somebody wants to know if you can talk a little bit about Memento and where you came up with that character.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And that's RP. Thanks for all the earlier comments too. Let's see. Memento. I wanted to introduce a new villain to Gotham. And I know I had this vision. I love the vibe of stories like Gotham by Gaslight and the Doom that came to Gotham and those kind of things. Those are such a cool energy.
Mhm.
And I wanted to introduce a story and introduce a character, a foil for Batman who is somewhere between Aleister Crowley and Jack the Ripper. Just that really cool but really dark kind of take. Somebody who has some kind of theatrical element visually, but is also really scary.
You're talking about Alan Moore.
Spoilers.
Right.
So well timed. That was good. So yeah, I wanted to. So I kind of thought of, and for some reason, my mind kept going back to the show True Detective, the first season,
Mhm.
and the whole vibe for that story. And I
Oh, yeah.
love the vibe of that show, and I thought it was perfect for a story like this. And I also something about the flash forward flashback thing is something that is just stuck in my head, and I just can't get it out. I don't always use it, but I do use it sometimes. I used it in The Last God, which is now
Mhm.
called Fellspire Chronicles. But I'm also using it for this. I really wanted to see a character in Batman's walkabout that is, at the time, he thinks well, shit. I should shut up.
Okay,
That
you
is
shut up. There are multiple characters from his walkabout that have showed up in this, and I like that aspect as well. Like
yeah.
I love the fact that we can do that. People can do that where you can say, "Oh yeah, there's stuff that happened," because there's this infinite amount of time that he developed, and he
Right.
met millions of people, and I can bring any
Right.
of them forward. Like, oh yeah, he met this person for 3 months at this time. If you add up all
Yeah.
those months, he's like 180 years old. But
Well, I really want to introduce a mentor for Batman back in the day and have these back and forth. Like I was thinking about what Mike said about Batman passing on his knowledge as a detective to his son. And I wanted to see his teacher, Professor Atticus Bly, saying things to him. And then later we see him say those same kind of things to his own, like literally so like the phrases that he took from Atticus Bly, he says to his own son. And then we get to see this. I love the idea of a mystery that, kind of spans generations, we see it take place back then and also now.
One of the most interesting things about Batman and Robin, about his relationship with Damian, is that Batman, Bruce Wayne, has no idea how to be a parent.
Yeah.
All he has is what Alfred has done, because let's face it, his parents were killed very young, and quite frankly, we get the impression that Alfred was really in charge of child raising.
Yeah,
right. But parenting, as those of us who are parents know, is largely an act of passing on stuff that deserves to be passed on.
Yeah.
How does Bruce do that? And what you've just said is how Bruce does that, how Batman does that.
Yeah.
He's quoting the people that he learned from. Now, it's very direct for him to do that. But, that's probably what Damian needs most.
Right. Yeah, he talks most about, there's an issue coming up. I wish it was out already, but there's an issue coming up where he talks about some of that stuff. By far, my favorite element of this book, of writing this book, is how busted both Bruce and Damian are, and how, like, in the pursuit of making themselves so exceptional, they are not like other people, and not all of those ways are flattering.
Right. And they don't want to be those people.
What's that? Sorry, Mike.
they don't want to be regular people. I don't even think Batman knows how to be a regular person. He knows how to play one if he's in a tuxedo.
Right.
And that's about it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. There's a yeah, that's I can be a little intense too. And when I was writing Superman, it was so great because as a father specifically, because he's just the ideal father, or should be, in my opinion. I don't want to see Superman struggling. That's a little gripe I had with the Superman and Lois show. As great as it is, I love that show, but I don't want to see Superman making these missteps as a dad that I can call out in the show. You know, like I want him to show me the way always. I want him to be the greatest dad fucking ever.
Yeah.
Batman is not that thing. Batman is like my worst instincts. Like so my son, as all kids, he is inclined to spend too much time on his screens. And for a while, we did the very common parenting trope of limiting like you got 1 hour today or 90 minutes, whatever it is. And he would just be watching that clock, and he just hated the shit out of it. And he hated it so much. He was so resentful of it. It made him so he could not enjoy the time that he did have. And I was like, well, let's figure out something else. So now I don't time limit him now. Instead, what I do is he has like a list of stuff he has to do every day. And it's not even like chores. I mean, some of it is. There's a couple like chore-y type things he has to do, but for the most part, Gene Hawes watching. I'm honored. Gene, I love your work. We never actually met in person, but you're the man.
He'll be on next week.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay,
so you can check it out. You can write in.
Yeah, Gene, if I'm going to be at more cons this year, I would love to buy you a drink at some point or a meal, whatever. Just to pick your brain about Superman. Just tell you you're awesome in person.
This is going to sound really weird, but it really isn't. Ask Gene for a massage.
No, sir. I don't think I will do that. I respect your opinion, but no thanks.
He's giving me a massage in the middle of conventions, two or three times. And boy, at a convention, it comes in great. I'll tell you.
I'm sure he's great at it. I think I'll just ask him about Superman if that's all right.
Yeah. No, I totally. You were saying, I think we interrupted a little bit, but when you were
it's okay.
About with your son and how you moved through that.
Oh yeah, so I gave him a list. Oh, I entered myself. I saw Gene's name. That's what it was. Anyway, so yeah, so he has stuff to do every day, and it's mostly self-improvement stuff. It's like exercise. He has to do his VWD time. His violence with daddy time, where we do like punching, like boxing mitts kind of stuff. So he has his VWD time. He has like some kind of exercise. Aside from that, he's got he reads, which he does on his own, but it's on there. He has to play trumpet. He plays his percussion. He plays like drum set and other stuff. Duolingo and various things, and then he can play his stuff.
So he's got things that are in his control that he can get through and do the things he wants to, so he can get there. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like I want him to move forward in a lot of different ways and just continue to grow like creatively. He makes these little stop motion movies. I don't put that on the list, but he does them. And he has kind of a lot to do, a lot on his plate, but not in a way that stresses him out. I just try to keep him moving forward. And I try to put those elements in the Batman story too. Like if I'm not careful, I will overload him if I'm not careful. And I have my own list for myself. I do every day, and so I have those Batman-y elements that I have to kind of keep in check so he doesn't like hate his life or me. So putting those things in the book has been really fun and rewarding, actually.
The thing that most kids have going for them is that they are naturally inquisitive and creative, and it's us, the adults, that screw that up.
Yeah.
So I think it is the creative person's responsibility to do the right thing and get the hell out of the way and let them be creative.
Yeah. You know, there's something that interesting that I noticed where so much of the creative process grows out of some kind of boredom or stagnation or the need to, I don't know, like you're in some kind of a box you try to push your way out of, and that's why you find yourself doing really cool shit. And now there are so many awesome distractions that we didn't necessarily have back in the day, that I find his creativity sometimes fettered by that. Like I mean, my son is the only example of this I have. I mean, I have some students that I see sometimes, but for the most part, the only kid that I see in this day to day is my son. And he, when he has too much access to too much awesome stuff, he becomes less creative because he's just consuming all the time.
That's right. That's right.
So I have to find a way to keep that balanced where, okay, you've done these things. Now let's go play Legos, and what kind of a set what set should we use in your next movie? What can we make that you can then shoot in your next stop motion film? Or, when we're running, he and I will run together and we'll make up these little adventures. We make we script our runs, like when there's some kind of a zombie adventure happening or whatever the thing is, we'll make up reasons why we have to make it 2 miles today, or why if we're running sprints, like what's happening in the walking places, and just try to give them creative outlets so it's not just constantly being entertained.
Right. Once we take control of our own entertainment, we create.
Yeah. Anders used to watch stuff like that too. He would, when we watched, I remember watching Into the Spider-Verse, and he didn't watch it sitting on the couch. He would get up, and he was going through the adventure with the characters. He was like running and jumping off the stuff. He put himself in it, I just thought that was so great.
Yeah. How old is he?
He is 10 now.
Oh my God. That's ridiculous.
I know, he's big. I don't like it.
That's ridiculous.
But
let's talk about this book.
Yeah.
God, I know you've been very excited about it. It came out, I think, last week or the week before.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Christmas Day.
I totally enjoyed it. I love the aspect of it. There's plenty of Nazis being hit, which is always good.
That's what you need.
Never a bad thing. How did this come about? Like, did somebody say, how did the pitch happen? Did they say Ghost Rider story? Did they say we want a military story? How did it come about?
It's been a long time. It's been long enough now that I think I can probably say somebody asked, an editor I just worked with on a thing, asked me about possibly doing a Ghost Rider series. Mm-hmm. This has been a while now.
Sure. And
I was so underwater, I couldn't really take it. And I felt, but I'd never really, I don't think at that time, that might've been the first book I said no to. And even then it wasn't really like a no, because it still would have been like a kind of a step up from where I was doing. I think it might've been like a parallel move or maybe a little bit better. I'm like, damn, I really don't want to say no to this, but I just don't have the time. I would fall completely on my face.
Yeah.
So I was like,
I remember when that was happening, and we were talking.
Yeah, I said something like, man, I would love to do it. I just don't have the time. But I'll tell you this: I was for political reasons, I've got this Nazi hang up. I've got this thing. I really dislike. I hate the fact that there are Nazis still, or people that call themselves that, which to me amounts to the same thing. I was like, if you let me do I was kind of thinking about what I would do with this book. And I was like, what if you let me do like a World War II era Ghost Rider in the European theater or something, I'll do that. Make it like a Nazi kill fantasy, like Inglourious Bastards kind of a book. That would be cool.
Right. Which is
they enough Nazis. It's just not possible.
Yeah, they're nature's perfect villain.
That's right.
Better than killer robots or zombies or anything.
That's right. And scarier.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't feel bad. You just mow them down. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
So, I asked them about that, and they pitched it up the chain. They were like, Tom really wants it to be Johnny Blaze. I was like, I'm busy. I can't do it. And I should have just said no outright. If I had taken it, I would have had to let go of another book. And it was a tricky time to do that. Anyway, so I ended up not doing it. I did some other Marvel stuff instead. And, but I kept thinking back to that possibility. I was like, man, what would I have done? How would that story go? And it kind of morphed into, over time, it developed into the story that now exists as Hellhunters. And there were a couple of panels I was on. Invariably, you'll get the question like, what would what's a character you'd love to write that you haven't yet? Or what's a team book you'd love to do or something? I'm like, I'll give you a team book. It's going to be Ghost Rider, Nick Fury, Sergeant Fury, Logan, like Peggy Carter, Bucky as a psycho, like Ed Brubaker, Psycho Child, Bucky. And whenever I talk about it, people are like, oh my God, why isn't this a thing yet? And at one point I did this on this big Marvel panel. I think, I can't remember if it was either MegaCon or New York. I did it. And this was on the Marvel panel, and CB was on the panel as well. And I basically soft pitched it on the panel. And CB said, approved. And I'm sure he was like joking. I was like, okay, I'll email you tomorrow. And I was working with my friend Jonas Scharf, who was the artist in Warlords of Appalachia, my creator own from years ago, who since then has kicked all kinds of ass. He did some stuff with Cullen Bunn that's great. Now he's doing stuff at Marvel. He's amazing.
Yep.
He drew up these little character designs for all the characters I just mentioned. And you just glance at it and you're like, yes, like this needs to be a comic book. And due to so anyway, I gave those little sketches. I mean, they were just like pencil sketches, but I showed them to CB and somebody else, and it ended up getting approved. So, and then the final piece was that I introduced Ghost Rider 44 on the pages of Incredible Hulk, and it was extremely popular. That was one of the better loved arcs that we did. So, and I think it got back to Marvel. So Nick Klein drew those issues. He was the series, the most regular artist on Hulk. And somebody bought at auction the first like full drawing, the first big spread of Ghost Rider 44 for some stupid number. Like they paid a ton of money for it. And it got back to Marvel how much they paid for it. And they were like, damn, let's come back to that Ghost Rider 44 book that PKJ pitched on that panel. And I got an email like, hey, do you someone do that book? So that's kind of how it came together.
I really like that cover, that first cover, for a lot of strange reasons. The coloring is spectacular. He says to the writer of the book, but the coloring is spectacular. That logo I love. And it was the first thing I saw, which is what you're supposed to see first. And I just loved it. Do you have any idea who designed that logo?
No, I don't. I don't know who did the logo. Let's see. I think Frank Wilson did. Man, I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Or Frank Martin, rather. Frank Martin did the interior colors, and I think he did this cover as well. Jonas Scharf drew the cover. Mm-hmm. The guy who did that first thing for me. He did the others too. Man, I love the Bucky one that's about to come up. There's a Bucky one that comes out in February, and damn, is it fun.
I always had this rule when I was a young Marvel reader that Marvel's really gone Ouroboros on itself when they resurrect Bucky. They've resurrected everybody. My God, I don't think anybody can tell you how many times Aunt May died. But Bucky was the one guy that nobody would touch. And I was very happy with that because his death was so instrumental to the resurrection of Captain America.
Yep.
And then they pulled it off. Yeah,
they did. Man, did they? He's like he's my favorite character almost.
He's one of my favorites.
Bucky. Man, writing him is so goddamn fun. It is, especially now, because I get to write him in that old, like real cliche kind of 1940s kind of jargon, like the old lingo, the way they used to talk, or at least in the movies they did. Writing him in that way and giving him that childlike innocence while also being kind of busted and psycho is just so unbelievably fun. I can't wait for you to see the next issue.
Yeah.
Number 2 comes out this month, but then number 3 is the Bucky issue.
Well,
And
I'm loving it. I'm so psyched about it. I think it's been
Waiting for it.
thanks. He doesn't know it. So one funny little detail about Bucky is that he doesn't know any songs. He doesn't know any songs. He doesn't know the words to any music because he's so young. He was so young that when he got into the army, the only songs there's a point in the book. I'll spoil this. It's not a plot point. At some point, they're like basically sneaking up on a squad, and or I guess they're exploring a bombed out town. And Bucky's like, man, I hate it when it gets quiet like this. Like the crowds come out right then every time. When it gets real quiet, the crowd starts about to jump out, and somebody gets annoyed and they're like, well, sing a song or something. He's like, I don't know any songs. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know any songs? You never, like, none of your buddies had a radio or nothing? And he's like, no. He's like, well, I mean, I know the cadence calls that they make us run to. And someone's like, don't fucking sing any of those. But then later on, he's like, they're mowing down Nazis, and he's giggling like a little kid, and he starts singing a cadence, and it's just so fun. I love writing Bucky. I can't wait for you to see.
I have not held a machine gun in 40 years.
You say it again, sorry.
I have not held a machine gun in over 40 years. And 2 of them were placed in my hand. One of those original, Thompson things, and a contemporary machine gun by the sheriff of Cook County, Illinois. He said, "Here, why don't you try that?"
Not a good idea.
We were surrounded by cops. It was a great idea.
This turned out to be quite the story, Mike. Why were you surrounded by cops holding a Thompson?
Listen,
well,
this is not surprising to anybody.
The sheriff's office holding a Thompson. So you're going to be surrounded by cops. That's how it works. But I loved it. I mean, you're immediately starting fury when you're doing that. It's Wahoo time, folks. And it's perfect for Nazis. I swear, if this Nazi thing gets any bigger here in the States, I'm getting me a machine gun, which, by the way, is not so hard to get. So watch out, Nazis.
Exactly.
Oh.
Was it the straight magazine or the big round one like you see in the gangster
movies? The Thompson was a round one, yeah.
Well, there was one that they used in war that had the straight magazine.
Yes. Do you know where they made the original Thompson submachine guns?
I would have guessed Chicago. Is that not the case?
It is true. It was at a jukebox factory.
At a what?
A jukebox factory that was repurposed for World War I. And by the time they'd made those Thompson machine guns, the war was over. So the government sold them cheap to whoever would buy them, which mostly was the mob.
Al Capone's like, I'll take some of those. Yeah,
it came in handy. It really has this bizarre history. The jukeboxes. I mean,
listen,
sorry,
you come to this show and you get all these strange tangents and connections that you never thought we were going to be talking about jukeboxes in Chicago that relate to machine guns, which are having to do with not killing Nazis in fake comic books. But
what are you talking about? I talk about this all the time.
I understand. One of the things that I love talking to you about stuff. When you're on a project, it gets all of you, and you're doing multiple projects right now. Obviously, you have 3 ongoing books that are coming out right now. There's other books that you're working on that I'm guessing from the text you sent me earlier we can't talk about, which I want to know about that. But you're like, these are on the table. We can talk about these, but what was left unsaid is what we can't talk about. So
there's other stuff coming up.
I'm sure
it's not all corporate stuff. There's other things that are coming out that are just me as well. I'm writing a webcomic now that I'm kind of excited about. Like this is with friends and collaborators.
Good.
So it'll be fun to get into at some point.
I'm excited about that. But I think before we get to like kind of our last bits, we do need to talk about what's going on here. This is the first issue of Incredible Hulk. You're on issue, I think issue 20 has come out. Is that right? I think 21 is about to come out.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think 21's about to hit.
Jeez.
I haven't read this much Hulk in probably 30 years.
Oh, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that.
I did read a bunch then, but it is captivating. The story is building on itself. There's a point where you think as you're reading a comic or reading a sequential story that you're going to start to fade away from it, and you're not allowing that to happen. Each new arc, you're like, oh, well, where are we going here? Oh, this I need to finish. I can't fade away from this. So how is that for you, where you've been on something this long? I mean, you did it with Superman, but Superman had, it seemed like Superman, you knew where it felt like Superman was driving to a point, whereas while this is there, it just definitely feels like it's a slower drive.
It is. There is still a point it's building to now, but
I know. I mean, I know that that's coming, but it definitely feels like it's a slower drive. It's much more roundabout, like a drive through the South kind of thing, like you had talked about. But how is that building and keeping that interest that you've been able to do?
Man, I just love it. I'm just trying to capture the feeling of, the collection of comics that I learned the love of the medium from was pretty small, but from the perspective of guys like you who just like know so much about the medium, I didn't have that many comics, and the ones I did have were very rarely consecutive.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever there was a story that was done in one or in two, maybe, it was just awesome. Especially with something like Marvel Team Up. You'd see Spider-Man team up with, Clea or Ghost Rider or one of the Fantastic Four, but not all of them or something. And you'd really get to know a character. That's how I learned the Marvel roster. It was through all those team up books. I had a fair number of those team up books, and sometimes they were two-parters. And I didn't always have both issues, but I did have some of those in pairs. And man, it was just so valuable to me to have the whole thing.
But some of those two-parters, as I recall, which means nothing, they featured like a third team-up person.
Mm-hmm.
So that you had character A and B in the first one, A being Spider-Man, and then in the second one you did have characters A and C, and B would be around.
Well, let me...
That's true.
I believe you, of course, but I'm trying to remember an example. So like I remember Spider-Man teaming up with, I want to say Johnny Torch, and they were up against Super Skrull. And I don't remember a third one coming into the story there, but maybe they did. Or like there was another one where it was him and Clea, but they were trying to save Doctor Strange, who had become a werewolf or some shit.
Yeah, it's Wednesday, of course.
Yeah. So I think the third character in that one was in that moment at least the bad guy. I think.
That's interesting.
Maybe I'm getting that wrong. But I'm trying to think of some other examples. I do remember a Ghost Rider one. I don't remember much about how it went. This is all so long ago. Yeah. There was an Iron Man one that was like Spider-Man and Iron Man, where Spider-Man and Iron Man when they met Blacklash. And that one was very impactful to me, actually. That was done in one, though. I think that was Marvel Team Up. It was Spider-Man, but it's not even in New York. It's in like Cleveland or something. And somebody is there for a trade show. It's this random thing. Iron Man just like flies in, and Blacklash are there looking for work. And in short, the point of the story is they told a kind of a sympathetic story about a bad guy just got out of prison. He's trying to get his life together, and the world just keeps giving him the hand. It's like, no, you're a loser, or you're a ex-con, or you're whatever. You broke your dad's heart. Don't come back here, or whatever. And just kind of makes it impossible for him to succeed. And that was reading that story was the first time in a story. I just remember I was expecting more of a just show up, kick the guy's ass, and fly back home. Everybody wins. And instead, I get the story where I kind of found myself asking, like, damn, like, are there bad guys? Like this guy, he tried to be a good guy, and they kind of kept him where he was, and they wouldn't let him change. And suddenly, I started to see every story much more differently, very differently.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but that's anyway. The point, what I was trying to say was I really valued having the stories done that I didn't have to know the entire Marvel team up series to know what was happening at that moment. And that's not kind of where comics are right now. Generally, if you want to know what's happening in the XYZ run of something, you have to have the whole series or you're just kind of lost.
Sure.
And I want people to be able to read just to pick it up pretty much anywhere and just get it. And so that does make the arc of the overall story feel more meandering sometimes, but there is still like basically I have a little goal, like a character driving goal for every arc. It's only 2 issues, but by the end of these 2 issues, Charlie will have moved from this place to this place in her relationship with Hulk and Banner. Or we introduce this new idea or this new whatever. So very slowly we have these incremental character growth moments that push the whole thing forward towards the end goal that I will be disciplined to not talk about. But there's something similar where it all goes. But I want every story to feel self-contained, even though that is kind of an illusion. It does lead somewhere eventually. So It's been extremely rewarding to be able to write these really short stories that I hope were as fun for readers as those short ones were for me in Marvel Team Up.
So RP wanted to know a little bit about what's currently going on with Charlie, because she's got now powers, and obviously it doesn't seem like it bodes well for her. They seem to be a little bit of a tainted power. It's been very exciting. Like that whole storyline has come well. And to be honest with you, the play between Nick and Danny on art, Nick Klein and Danny Earls, has been perfect.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you feel that way.
I think that it's
That's
been
true.
they've each had the right stories to tell. It's suited their styles because they are slightly different, but they fit well together. It's been good.
Let me ask you a question, and this is a fanboy question, as opposed to a journalistic endeavor. Is there a character in a character in mainstream comics, which is mostly Marvel and DC, but doesn't have to be, that you do not want to write, that you have no desire to try?
Man, I feel like I'm going to say it, and then some editors, like in the middle of an email, like, well, never mind.
No. I, as an editor, I would do that immediately.
I would have to find my way into a Flash story.
Okay.
I would not necessarily say no.
I don't know how. I don't know where. I'll give you. That's a good answer for you, because if I just told you Flash, I would expect for you to have to think about which Flash.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
I just don't know.
Well,
what are you saying, Mike?
I said it's true for all these guys. How many Spider-Men?
No, well, there's only. But I understand that. But,
I feel like I know. I mean, I grew up with Superman and Batman. Like those guys just shaped me. I mean, I'm watching that first Christopher Reeve film and also the comics I was consuming around that same time. Just seeing the story about, a confused, lonely kid in the American Midwest who discovers he was sent there by people who loved him to do great things, while John Williams' music is soaring over you.
right.
Just completely shaped my life. I mean, like I'm now a professional trumpet player who gets to write Superman. I just love it. And honestly, Batman too, just like that concept, the idea that you can shape yourself into, like through sheer force of will, you can make yourself into a force of nature. Both those stories mean everything to me. And plus even the Spider-Man story of the whole idea of can't but must, where like Spider-Man is very often kind of underpowered for the shit he has to do.
Yes.
But he has to, and he gets it done, and he gets destroyed to
Mhm.
do it, or he'll destroy himself to do it, or the idea that Spider-Man wins and Peter Parker loses. Like these, I get all that. Like I get Spider-Man, I get Batman, Superman, I get Wonder Woman, I get Constantine. Flash, I just don't know him as well as I should. And I was at one point I felt that way about Aquaman too. I feel like I get Aquaman now. I didn't before. When I first talked to Brian Cunningham, he was the Justice League. For those who don't know, he was the Justice League editor for years at DC, and he was the first one. He's the one that brought me into DC. He was like, "Hey, would you want to do something here?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" And it's like, "Well, here are the books I'm editing. What would you want to do?" And he says, like, Flash, Green Lantern, God, who else? Aquaman, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League something. Like there's a bunch of them, but he said Constantine, and I said Constantine all day. I will crush this. I know I've read every word that Constantine's ever said in the book. And he said, well, what I really need is Aquaman. And
as an editor should say,
well, why'd you ask me then? Just
Mike's sitting here smug.
Yeah, I am. Good question to ask a writer that you haven't really worked with under those circumstances, to see what your predilections are, and then to toss you a challenge. And that is because editors are pricks.
Yeah. Well, so obviously I was like, well, that's what I meant. I love Aquaman. So yeah, I'll do it. So
Aquaman was always a vaguely defined character. He started out as the nice submariner, and you realize, well, that's an oxymoron. And then he sort of floundered around and Ramona Fradon did magnificent stuff.
Yeah.
And then other people later on, have done very good runs on Aquaman. But there's not one that you could point to and go like, wow, that's the definitive Aquaman.
Yeah. Well, at the time, not too much time had passed since the Jeff Johns run, and that first little bit was good. There's some good stuff in there. So obviously I read all of that. I read everything that had come out recently, but then I started doing deeper dives. I read the Sub Diego thing, which I thought was very strong. Some other old ones. And so I found my way in, and eventually I settled on, I really like the idea of like the King Arthur kind of mythology of what could be down there and the world building opportunities. So I found my way into Aquaman, and I think I know him right now. I would just have to, I think I would say yes to a Flash story almost because of my ignorance, because it would be a chance for me to kind of fill a hole in my game, because I don't feel like I know the Flashes well enough to even really tell the difference in meaningful ways. I don't know the nuances of their characters really, or what I would do. I know this family book now, and that's cool. That's cool. I love the idea that he's late all the time. I've seen stories in which Flash thinks he can do everything in the time allotted, and so he tends to be late, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's a kind of a fun character beat.
Sure.
So anyway, I don't know. I'd have to figure out my way into it. But Flash is I just wish I knew Flash better than I did. I never really found a love for Flash the way I have for other characters, so I would need to find my way in. But I would happily do it.
I will tell you, Flash Volume 2, the first 12 issues, those are great.
When you say Volume 2, is that
so those are the ones immediately? That's the first Wally Flash. Some person you're looking at edited those books.
Oh, nice. Okay,
that's true. And there's a trick ending to that story.
Yeah.
So what years are we talking about?
So it's 1988.
Yeah.
Is that Wade?
No, it was Mike Barron.
Oh, okay, cool.
We had an ending to that story, that first year's story, that got axed at the very last minute, which didn't make me happy. Wally was 21. He just turned 21. He inherited $1 trillion. He got a nifty pair of boots that won't, wear out. And he is now the Flash. He's no longer Kid Flash. So what does he do? He does what every 21-year-old male does. He uses it to get laid. And and he had a number of different young women as partners. But we were headed toward, and some people didn't like that, but we were headed towards this ending where this one of them was going to come down with AIDS, was going to be HIV positive. And Wally had to go through all of these major changes to deal with it. You know, in addition to his being tested, just telling all of his other girlfriends what was going on. It's a really good storyline, and our publisher killed it. And that annoyed me, particularly for its time. I mean, I think we really would have been doing something at that in 1988, because that's a couple years after the AIDS thing started. A story for Vertigo. It wasn't Vertigo in those days, but a story for Karen Berger's line that became Vertigo was also killed for that, pretty much the same reason. And obviously that wouldn't have happened 5 years later, or 10, certainly not 10 years later. But at that moment in time, hey, we don't always get what we want, and sometimes we don't even get what we need.
I mean,
sorry, I lost that story.
Well, they all left. So. I do want to say that, like, issue 63 of Marvel Team Up features Iron Fist, and issue 64 features Daughters of the Dragon. So that's where Mike was. So that did happen, where it's the two-parter, but the title guest character is different.
Right.
Same story.
Still like Daughters of the Dragon.
Sure. The story is the night of the
dragon. I wanted a TV series back
that would have been great.
On the Netflix days. I really wanted that. But
before we let you go, before we get to this, I want to give you an opportunity. You started talking, we kind of jumped right ahead, but you started talking about your other job and how that's going to be coming to an end. I want, what do you want to say about that?
That's a good question.
If you want to say anything, if you don't want to, but like it's something you and I have talked about for a long time, and I know you haven't hidden from it, and I know that I will tell you that your video from last week still opened some people's eyes. People weren't aware. We're unaware of the fact that you are active military.
Oh, well, tell me about the reception. I actually haven't seen much of that. Or people saw
it was somebody was just like someone I just noticed in the comments on something that, like, I had no idea that was the case, and something because they had seen it. But you're retiring this year.
Yeah. I've done 20 years in the Army, and I'm getting out.
Wow.
So yeah, I think at this point, even if I'd not done 20, I think I might anyway.
Sure. I'm not going to argue with you.
But I mean, it's good to. I will say people have a perception about the military that is not necessarily the case. I've talked to a lot of people who assume, like, they see the haircut and they assume they know how I vote and what I think and all that, and that's not the case. There's the demographics of the military basically reflect the American people. There's a certain kind of right winger that might find their way into the military more often, but it's also a very diverse group. So there's also a lot of other. Here we go. Reading what Jane wrote.
I think Jane is angling for a job in the Trump administration.
Trumpet's hard, man. No, anyway. I hope to still play music. Also, I will say that I have a lot of colleagues in the military that I value a great deal, that are great musicians, great people, and I will miss them very much. But I'm still gonna be in the area. I hope to keep playing a lot. There's also things I want to do creatively. Like, I was talking to somebody the other day about this works of art that we really admire. Art meaning, visual art or music or film or any, like, whatever, the things that we would have been proud to have made ourselves. And I just find myself drawn to things that cross media, like things like a painting based on a Shakespeare work, or well, or a graphic novel, obviously, or comic, or the music and cinematography of I don't know, I something about the joining of different forms of media that really speaks to me.
Sure.
And I don't know what that's going to look like. I feel like comics is kind of leading me in this path that I don't know what it's going to look like yet. This is this is probably not a great time to invoke Neil Gaiman's name. But
Well, we did that earlier, so.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, all recent events aside, I remember hearing about a reading that he did at the Sydney Opera House years ago of a story that he'd written. It's called something like "The Truth is a Cave in the Black Mountains" or something like that.
Sure.
And then they took there were paintings done by Eddie Campbell, and they did, and there was music chosen, and they did this big reading with music and art by Eddie Campbell behind on the screen at the Sydney Opera House, and that just sounded dope as fucking hell. I would love to do something like that. I would love to write the music for a story that I've written and have it all put together with with artists that I admire or work with.
Listen,
and
let's get you and Cecil together. She'll write the libretto, you write the music, and then
we did something like that for Grimjack, where Timothy Truman, who is a brilliant musician, phenomenal guitar player, recorded pretty much a whole soundtrack, wrote and recorded for this Grimjack movie that wasn't even in the works at that time. And we had a TV deal for a while. We had a bunch of different deals, and I always wanted to hear Timothy's stuff in that movie, because there you have the artist who co-created the character, who worked on the first several years and helped, and then later on came back, did even more, doing the music and being a great musician. My God, that's like sitting down to a really juicy steak for me. That's how it works.
Yeah, I found myself drawn to that kind of thing more and more.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to get out of the military for various reasons. But I do there. Basically, I've been doing the same thing creatively, musically for the last 20 years, and it's been awesome. But I want to do other things now. Like I'm done with this kind of a thing, and I want to start playing a lot more jazz than I have been lately. My jazz chops have kind of been on like maintenance levels for a while. I want to start moving forward again. I want to start composing more. Obviously, I'm going to be writing, but I know at some point I'm going to start bringing my music and my writing together in ways that I have not yet identified, and I can't really do that. I don't have any more bandwidth to do that kind of stuff right now. So letting go of the Army stuff will enable me to take those next steps, I think, and also make time for other things I want to do. I want to do more MMA. I want to do the certain things I want to do with my son, like some traveling things I'd love to do. So leaving the Army will allow me to put that time where it belongs. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. May I make a recommendation as to a piece of music?
Please.
Jazz as well. The last 2 or 3 albums that Ginger Baker recorded on his own are jazz albums, if you have to put a label on. They are truly brilliant. And the last one, which might have been released posthumously, it's like a Chuck Berry thing, he just died and they released it anyway, was called WHA, W-H-A, question mark. And it's a picture of Ginger Baker in a cloud of cigarette smoke, which is, I think, a permanent thing. Was a permanent thing. It is brilliant. It is brilliant, in my opinion. Yours may differ, but check it out. It's 45 minutes of your life. Check it out.
I'll make a note right now. All right, cool.
I'm glad we were able to talk about that, because I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
I'm excited for the next challenge.
I'm excited for your son.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean that too.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as far as how I feel politically and all that, I've got a ton of readers, and I respect them all. I'm grateful to all of them, and I don't want to I know I disagree with a lot of them. That's okay. And as far as how I feel about certain things where we're at, that is in my writing. So I'll let my story speak for that. There's a story that in the arc, the Metallo arc, right when in Action Comics, after Superman comes back from Warworld, he's talking to one of the super twins, and he's got helping them get ready for bed, and they're brushing their teeth. They're still trying to figure out all of our weird cultural ways. And let's see, one of them sees the glasses that Clark Kent wears, and she's like, reading glasses, like, these are for the old and enfeebled or something. Like, why do you wear these? And he tries to explain why he wears the disguise. He's like, oh, because the Blue Earthers will find us and kill us in our sleep or whatever. Like our enemies will find us and kill us. It's like, well, they're not our enemies. Like, they've been, like, some of them have been misled. Some of them wouldn't even be our opponents if we all just talked a little more and understood, like, people that think they're their enemies aren't really, and they've been misled. And like, in the end, people will, if we are able to communicate better, people will surprise you. And then later on in the story, in another issue down the line, they come face to face with people, the Blue Earth, people who have now become superpowered, and they're after them. And he's like, I told my daughter that you're not really our enemies. And, I have to believe that you put on those uniforms today because to set out to do some good. I have to believe that you think that, because people who put on uniforms to commit crimes are the worst kind of people.
Right.
So tell me, which one are you? And in that moment, a couple of them you see them with, take pause, and they're like, oh, damn. And a couple of them charge forward. They're like, fuck you, I am the bad guy.
Yep. No,
but not all of them were. And that matters to me. And that was, I really meant it when I said that. I think there are a lot of people who are really solid people who have been misled, or that we just disagree on a few things that are a few little, things that are getting weaponized. And, it's just a hard time in that way.
A lot of scared people out there, and that is across the political spectrum. What my definition of America is that we have diverse opinions. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we have diverse opinions motivated by true things, by the truth. There's no point having an opinion if it's based on bullshit.
Yeah.
So the truth is great, but the truth will not set you free. You're entitled to have an informed opinion, but only an informed opinion. So, I can't say you're a child molester, in my opinion. Oh, that's bullshit. I got to prove it, which is not where I was planning on going.
Yeah, thank you.
What you're talking about here is essential to the core of what I consider to be the American culture. And I think that's critical. I have my own opinions, and I'm very upfront about it. I don't naysay other opinions. I try to be respectful. These days, that's a lot harder because the whole respect thing has diminished, to say the least. And I long for the day that we can go back and have honest, serious, fact-based opinions.
Yeah, exactly. We have different information ecosystems, and that's kind of divided us, but we're not enemies, in my opinion. That's what Superman believes. That's what Superman believes, and that means that's what I believe too.
Except for the Nazis.
Except for the Nazis.
Yeah, we can
always we get to machine gun them.
with hellfire.
Exactly. Just wait. Issue 5.
Thanks. There's a merchandising opportunity.
Thanks for being here. Yeah. Oh, hey, RP is just putting in here, all will be well. It's one of my favorite quotes from St. Walker.
Yeah.
But thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this. I got to say, we do this show, and I appreciate you doing it with us. You and I have been friends for a long time now, and I am better to have known you. I respect your career that you've done. I enjoy the career that you have and you're going to continue with. And it's, if anybody who's watching hasn't or unfamiliar with Philip's writing, it will move you. And that's one of the things I look forward to every time I pick up a book of yours.
Well, thanks, you guys. I mean, I feel the same way, Bob. Thanks so much. It's always great to see you both. I always learn a lot here, and whenever we talk offline as well.
Yep.
It's wonderful talking with you. This is, I think, my first opportunity to have a second visit on this program.
Oh, that's true. That's probably true.
And in the perfect world, an old broadcaster like me would like to say, okay, let's make it better. You did. Thank you, Philip.
Oh, well, I'm honored, Mike. Thanks so much. It's always an honor to talk to you.
Well,
I want to hear more about you machine gunning down cops next time I see you.
Yeah, that's weird. I've had an unusual life.
You have. Man, I love hearing your stories. I really do.
Right. Well, we're up against our time limit, so I'm gonna pull you out, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Looking forward to what you have coming forward that we know about and the stuff that we don't know about. So
yeah, I can't wait to tell you. It's gonna be great.
All right, great.
Thank you very much for being here, Philip.
You guys too. It was always a pleasure, an honor. Take care.
All right. Gene Haas next week.
Gene Ha next week. We are going to be here. We are very excited.
He's the reason why. He's one of the few reasons why I go back to Chicago just for lunch.
Yes. Well, we are going to discuss that, you and I, over the next couple of days about us doing that.
Yes.
And all of you, thank you for being here tonight. We're super excited that you were. We look forward to seeing you next week. Gene's going to be here next week. We still have to figure out the week after that, but we have a couple of people lined up beyond that. We're so thankful to be doing this show. People who reach out to us. We love to be able to have people on and talk about comics and what they have going on and where they came from and what we're doing. Thank you in the chat. You guys have been great. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you later.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Again, we always appreciate it every week, more than we can possibly say, because it's the end of the show and we don't have enough time. Bob.
Well, we'll see you later.
All right. Good night, folks.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?